Bonjour. Bienvenue à tous vous et Beaucamp. Et merci bien pour être venu. C'est magnifique que devant autant de monde ici. Ce n'est pas seulement l'entrée que vous avez tout pris à la commission de la langue geneziaise qui m'aurait encouragé, mais et tout, je tenais à bien dire que ne peuvent pas être ici encore assistés. C'est excité-moi de penser à ce que nous pouvons faire pour notre langue maternelle et pour notre chère île. Ce n'est qu'à tout votre aide et votre souchou que nous pourrons le faire, que je vous remercie. So what I have just said, for those who need to know, is... I don't think it deserves that. Welcome everyone to Beaucamp, and thank you all for coming. It's wonderful to see so many people here. I've been hugely encouraged by the interest that's been shown in the Guernsey Language Commission, not only by all of you, but by many others who are unable to be present in the person this evening. I'm excited to think what we can do for our native language and for our beloved island. It can only be done with your help and support, so thank you. And I apologise for showing off by attempting to speak Genezier. I regret that I'm unable to speak it properly, and that's a fact that prompted me to sign up to Jan Markey's excellent lessons. Like so many of the post-war generation, I heard Guernsey French, as we called it, spoken by older relatives and also around and about, especially near Perel, where we were brought up. I got used to hearing it. I got used to the accent, and with a knowledge of standard French, I can understand Genezier up to a point, but that's all. Speaking it is more difficult, but I wish I could do so. Genezier is an integral part of our island culture, our heritage. It's what defines us and makes our community so unique. What makes us special also makes these islands a wonderful place to live. And it is what, above all, makes me proud to be a Guernseyman. I was proud to serve for 8 years as bailiff, and now I would like to give something back to the island. Helping to launch the Language Commission is one way of doing so. We can all agree we now have a fantastic opportunity to do something with Genezier. Exactly what we will do is not clear, which is why we need your help. Many of you have been working with Genezier for some time now, and that's wonderful. Through the Language Commission, I would like to support and encourage what you do, and to do more, making the best use of the money, £300,000 over 3 years, which the States has resolved to make available through the Committee for Education, Sport and Culture. Yes, it would be lovely to have more money, but that's a good start, and we must use it as best we can. We won't be able to do everything that many of you would like us to do, so we'll need to prioritise. You need to tell us what you would like to see, what you would like to happen, and we then need to take the best of those ideas and do the best that we can with them. It is an enormous challenge, but it's an exciting challenge. It's a challenge for the whole community. Initially, the likes of you and other language supporters who can't be present this evening, but ultimately, it's for the benefit of us all, for the whole community, for Guernsey, and for all who enjoy these beautiful islands. So thank you for coming here this evening. There are many people following the live stream on Facebook, and this will be recorded, so in due course I'm sure there'll be many watching on YouTube. Thank you to those who are watching. In September 2020, the States of Guernsey resolved to establish a commission to sustain, develop and promote Genezier and they voted £100,000 for each of 3 years to fund it, following the model of successful commissions such as the Sports Commission and the Health Improvement Commissions. Last month, a new committee was registered, the Guernsey Language Commission, LBG, a company limited by guarantee. It is an independent company, independent of the states, which I have agreed to chair as the inaugural chairman to get it up and running. So the company is the vehicle for delivering the project, and we want to start the journey. Where the journey will take us and how we will get there, I don't know. You have to help us. So the aim of this evening is to ask you to help us to plan that journey and offer to help us to get to where we will go. It has to be a community project. A few of us cannot do it alone. It must involve as many people as possible. We have a wonderful opportunity to promote and raise awareness of our language, which, as I said, is such an important part of our unique island culture. We have a heritage of which we can be proud, and we are proud, and we owe it to our forefathers and to future generations to preserve and promote it. So the aim of this evening is to share with you where we are currently, to explain how we will approach the task, but above all, to ask for your ideas and your suggestions, for your support and your help. We want to hear from anyone and everyone who is interested to learn more about Genesier or about the Guernsey Language Commission and to find out how they might get involved. I urge everyone to seize the occasion. At the rear of the hall, on the left as you go out, there are some forms, and I would be grateful if you could complete one, either at the end of this evening and leave it on your way out, but the form will also be available to download and complete online if you prefer to take it away and think about it, or if you're listening online and you're not here in person. So that's more than enough for me for now. I'll be back later. But before we get into the details, I would like to welcome Deputy Andrea Dudley Owen, the President of the Committee for Education, Sport and Culture. Deputy Dudley Owen.
Merci. Bienvenue comme petit café va, mes amis. That is my off-script piece. My Genesiers, or the patois, my nana used to call it, is not that good. So when I find more hours in my week, I will be signing up to the language lessons, which I hope the Commission will be helping to sponsor for the community. Well, we know that a lot has happened since the States of Guernsey resolved to establish the Language Commission in September 2020. A global pandemic, no less. A second lockdown. A general election, newly elected politicians, and a government work plan, whatever that comes to be. But I am delighted now that we are getting on with this launch of the Language Commission. And the committee is absolutely thrilled that the Guernsey Language Commission is now in a position to really start to increase the profile of Genesiers and to help people understand what a unique and special part of our island heritage it is. I know that Sir Richard Collis is genuinely excited about the prospect of the Commission bringing together the vast amount of knowledge that exists around our native language to garner support for the long term. And we are grateful that he is able to bring his talents, his skills, his energies to leading the Commission through its early days. Before I hand back to Sir Richard, I'd like to recap on the role of the Commission as set out in the policy letter which was brought to the States of Guernsey by the previous Committee for Education, Sport and Culture. They were the ones that did all the heavy lifting on this. And this is how we see it working. The mandate for the Guernsey Language Commission will be to sustain, develop and promote Genesiers as a unique aspect of the island's culture, heritage and identity. The Commission's first task will be to work with the committee to develop a business plan with short, medium and long-term goals built upon a progressive series of strategic projects, each with measurable objectives. The Commission will be expected to focus initially on 4 core objectives, which can be summarised as raise awareness of Geneziers and encourage participation, giving it a relevance to the present-day population and economy of the island. Facilitate the effective teaching of Geneziers. To research, record and archive Geneziers, ensuring that this vital piece of our heritage is not lost. Raise funding to enable the Commission to deliver its mandate. So, I would like to emphasise that the Language Commission will be independent of the states. And whilst we will liaise closely with the Commission through our non-states member, Advocate Jason Green, it is important that it is able to take the decisions that they feel are right for achieving their objectives. So, without further ado, I'll hand back to Sir Richard to take you through what the Language Commission will now be doing.
So, there is a problem with the microphone. Sadly, the microphone's on, but one of the speakers isn't working. And even though it's on, it's actually on maximum volume, which isn't. So for those listening on Facebook, they're actually getting a better service than those of us in the room have. So if you want to nip outside and watch on Facebook. Just to recap then on what Deputy Dudley Owen has said, the states and the committee have given the Commission really almost a blank canvas to work upon, because the role is so broad. And the purpose of having a business plan is to set the strategic objectives across the 4 headings that she went through. And raising awareness, facilitating the effective teaching, researching, recording and archive, and raising funding. And of course, much of that is already going on. Sorry, I've gone too far. So much of that is already happening. One thing I want to make clear is that to deny a story that I've heard from others who are concerned that the Language Commission will be taking over a lot of the good work that has already been happening. That is not the case. The Language Commission wants to encourage people to continue with that good work, but to support them and to hear from them what they're doing, to ask them if they need additional support, whether it might be financial or by way of publicity or in any other way. Come to the Language Commission and ask. There may be things that you could do better if only you had that support. The Language Commission may be able to help you with that. And in that sense, the Language Commission will be a bit like an umbrella organisation, just supporting an awful lot of what is going on. I am delighted to see so many of you here. I deliberately haven't gone out and invite particular people to come because I don't know all the good work that's going on, and I didn't want anybody to feel that they've been overlooked and omitted. So it's absolutely fantastic that so many of you are here. And on that note, I'm going to hand over to Joe Dowding, who is going to talk about what is happening at present, the projects on which the Language Commission can build in the future. Thanks, Joe.
Bonsoir, see Joe. Can you hear me okay at the back? Yep. Right, okay. So
nearer to the microphone, perhaps.
I'm from Guernsey Museums, and there's going to be a lot of talk about the future tonight, but I'm here to talk about what's happening now. So individuals and organisations, including you, continue to support our language as you have done for many decades, some of you. It's wonderful that there are places that you can go to hear, see, speak or improve your Genezier today. There's speed patois for beginners, pure patois for more fluent speakers, social events with groups such as the Assemblée, the U3A and the St Peter's Church Cafe on a Thursday, and I can personally recommend their selection of cakes, It's marvellous. But of course, things don't happen on their own, and it takes work to put on events, do translations, produce resources, keep learning. We have, to name a few, we have Donkey Dialogue in the press, the articles in La Rochelle newspaper, the news with Cynthia on BBC Guernsey. I could continue. At the museum, we continue to host different Guernsey courses for adult learners, from total beginners to intermediate level. The museum has been involved in recording the language for some years now, and it's very pleasing that we have so many speakers recorded. Of course, we're always on the lookout for new recordings if you haven't been recorded yet. One community project that has touched many people's lives recently was Voice Voix. This was a social history project to record people who grew up with Guernsey. People were photographed and recorded in their own homes, which gave a very personal snapshot of the language here and now. It was led by Aaron and Jan and resulted in an exhibition at Candy that many of you came to see. Its legacy continues with an online exhibition, a recent stamp issue, and the promise of the exhibition going further afield. And we at the museum were delighted to be at the heart of this project. Also from the museum, we coordinate the translation service, which continues to be busy and receive requests from all over the world. Popular uses for the translations are house names, jewellery engravings, and tattoos. And of course, this is used for local businesses as well. And if you'd like a translation, please get in touch. Not a tattoo. I can't help you with that. And I'd just like to end by giving a special thank you to all those unofficial language ambassadors out there. Those are the cheerleaders, those people using the language in whatever way they can. Speaking, writing, reading, even just talking about it, but crucially learning. You are part of a unique community and something very special indeed. So thank you. Merci bien fait.
So isn't it wonderful that there is so much going on already? And as I say, the Language Commission wants to encourage that, to help to support that, but also to do a lot more. And before anyone asks, I am not planning to get a tattoo. So, as Deputy Dudley Owen says, we need to have a plan. That will be the first task of the Guernsey Language Commission. I would prefer to call it a language plan. It's not a business, it's a language plan. And I believe that will more accurately describe what the Commission wants to do. The committee, I believe, will be releasing some funding to enable us to get to that stage of producing the plan, but they won't release the rest of the funding until they know how we propose to use it. As a taxpayer, I'm delighted about that because I don't like seeing states' money wasted. So the idea that we have to go back to the states to justify how it is to be spent, I think is a wise precaution. But it is a vote from the states. The states have voted the money, so the money will be forthcoming as long as we have a good plan. And that's what we will have. We will not be appointing commissioners. I know there are a number of people wondering, have we already appointed commissioners? We have not done so. We will not be appointing commissioners until we know what the commission is going to be doing, because then we need to get the right people, the best people with the skill sets needed to be delivering the work. As you've heard earlier, we've got some broad ideas of the headlines we need to work to, but the actual detail of that, we need to make sure we have the right people on board to do that. So the very first stage, and I've mentioned we need to hear from as many people as possible, we want to create a working group with representatives of as many people as possible who want to be involved, who will come together, and they will help to feed the ideas in, and they will help, and we want to be as inclusive as possible, and we want as many people as possible to come on board. So the first step will be appointing that language working group. The group will then need to sift through the ideas to come up with the initiatives that can be developed. As I said at the outset, £300,000 is a wonderful amount of money, but it's not going to do everything that everybody would like to do. So we're going to have to prioritise what can reasonably be delivered, and to develop budgets and plans and timescales. One question I've asked is, what will success look like? When will people know? What will we have to do before people can say, yes, the Language Commission has been a success? It's such a blank canvas, such a wide mandate, such a wide brief that the Commission has been given, that there's a lot of scope for the Language Commission, with your help, to define what are the best things we can do. But we've jolly well got to make sure we then deliver against those. If we can do that, if we can demonstrate success, if we can demonstrate achievement, I very much hope that we can go back to the States in due course and say, let us have more money. We need more money to keep going. This isn't a 3-year project. This is the start of a much longer project. But we have to be able to demonstrate and reassure the States that we've got off to a good start. So we will be working on a plan, which Advocate Jason Green will be saying a bit more about in a moment, I think. I think you're going to talk to that, aren't you? Yeah. And as part, I've said we want to engage with as many people as you to come on board on the working group, but also through the forms that will be available in other ways. Please let us have your ideas. Please let us have your suggestions. I've heard so many creative ideas from different people out there. I know people have got some wonderful ideas. Let's get them all together. And we also at the same time want to be engaging with the academics who are enthusiastic at helping us with the language. And I'm pretty sure that Julia Salabank is listening, and if you are, thank you for doing so. I know that Professor Mary Jones is, because I've already had a text from her in Cambridge, and she's such a passionate supporter of Je ne sais. We need to engage with them. They can advise us. They can tell us what we can be doing. And we also need to speak to other islands. That place, whatever it is, over there somewhere, Jersey, they're already ahead of us. The Isle of Man, they're ahead of us. They may have had a bigger budget, and we may not be able to match what they've done, but we can learn from what they've done. They'll be able to tell us what works. They'll be able to tell us what doesn't work. And there will be other islands. There will be other islands, other communities who are keeping their languages alive. We must reach out to them and gain from their experience. And through the language working group, the working party we want to set up, we want to reach a consensus about how we can move forward. What are the projects we need to be pursuing, and what are the timescales within which we can do it? As I say, we won't be able to do everything. And therefore, we will come up with a plan that we can then, as I say, take back to the committee for the release of the further funding. Only at that point, as I said, will we then be recruiting commissioners. I may or may not be involved in that stage. I've said I'm happy to get it going, but I want the best people to be taking it forward thereafter. Whether I'm considered to be one of those or not, I don't know. But I think, no, we need the best people at that point, and it will only be then that we'll be recruiting them. So don't be worried if you think that you should have been asked to be a commissioner. We're not yet at that point. That will come later. And then the job of the commissioners and the commission at that point will be to deliver, as I say, and be able to demonstrate success. So, I told you that the company has been formed, and so we will have, it is a company, it has all the responsibility that companies will have. It will have directors who will have fiduciary responsibilities, but above all, they have to come up with a plan. They need to be business-minded primarily. The language expertise will come from others. It will be the directors who will be helping to facilitate and build a plan. Who will the directors be? Well, I've agreed to be the chairman. Steve Foote has been working with education on this already for some time. Many of you will know Steve Foote. He runs Blue Ormer Publishing and recently worked with Professor Murray Jones to produce the glossary based on the research that my Uncle John had done in the 1930s. He's passionate about the language. He was fantastic in the way he supported her. He is now the managing director of the Prio Library, a part-time post, but he has additional time available to be working with the Commission. He's a fantastic person to be on board. He would love to have been here tonight. He has put so much work into putting everything together for tonight, but sadly, he went down with the COVID last week. So he's listening online. And Steve, I hope you're better. I hope we'll see you soon. Thank you for what you've done. We want to keep the board, as I say, it needs to be business focused. We want to keep it small. We'll have one or two other people. One person who I'm delighted has just agreed to join is Rob Girard. Many of you will know Rob, 42 years with NatWest Bank, all his business experience, all his banking experience, all his knowledge. He didn't speak English, he tells me, till he was 3 years old. So it's wonderful to have people with those skills, and that will be what will enable us to come up with a plan, as I say, we take to the Commission. We may perhaps have one more person on the board. We don't want it to be a big board. It doesn't need to be, not to do what we need to do initially. It is a company that is independent of the states, so education, sport and culture will not be represented on the board, but to assist us to make sure that we are on the right track, a non-states member on the Committee for Education, Sport and Culture, Advocate Jason Green, will be attending our meetings. So he will be a non-voting member, but he will be there representing the committee at our meetings, but equally representing us when it gets back to the committee. And now that's my cue to hand over to Advocate Jason Green, who's going to talk to the next slide. Thank you, Jason.
Bonjour, comme tu va? That's just about my limit, I suspect. Thank you, Sir Richard, and thank you everyone for coming along this evening. As Richard said, I'm the non-voting member on the Committee for Education, Sport and Culture, and I effectively will be the conduit between the Commission and the Committee, really with a view to making sure the Committee is aware of what's going on, but equally being able to chip in and help where I can. And I'm very pleased to do so because this is a project which I'm passionate about. Some of you here will know that I have participated in the past in some lessons. I'm also proud to say that a few years ago I won the Beginners' Cup in the Eisteddfod. To be fair, with a great deal of help from certain people who are sat here tonight. They know who they are. But I put myself forward and got involved because my elderly grandmother was a speaker. My late grandmother had grown up in the 50s when she understood it as it was spoken to her, but she never spoke it. A common occurrence, as Richard alluded to. I was determined to have a basic conversation with my grandmother, which I was just about to do before she passed away. It's interesting because when I was growing up, Sunday lunch, my grandmother would come for lunch. After lunch, she'd do the washing up. She'd chatter away in patois. My mother would listen, and there'd be the odd yes and no from my mother, and the rest of us didn't know what was going on. But it was so interesting and fascinating to hear that it was really why I wanted to start the lessons, and I wanted to be able to have a conversation with her. And it was great that I could achieve that. So for me, this is part of our heritage. It's part of who we are. It's part of this island community. So we have to crack on. We have to preserve it. We have to enhance it. We can't wait. We need to deliver on this. Now's the time to get it right. So the language working group will comprise of the initial people that Richard's referred to, plus a group from the community, hopefully many of you that are here tonight. All of you, I'm sure, can bring something special to the table and make this a success. That group will then develop the language plan, building on the objectives that the states have set in the policy letter, building on the what, the why, the how. It's good that the policy letter gives us some guidance, but as Richard alluded to, it is very much a blank piece of paper. There's plenty of room for creativity, and of course, we will look for assistance from other jurisdictions and other places and be able to pick the best bits. The plan then needs to be submitted and approved by the Committee for Education, Sport and Culture, so that then triggers the release of the funds to the Commission. Following that process, the Working Party can finalise the future structure of the Commission, looking at numbers of commissioners, their roles, whether there should be small working groups concentrating on certain aspects of the objectives, and so on. And of course, to promote and support the plan going forwards. There's a lot to do in a relatively short period of time. So you'll see from the timeline here that during May, the members of the working group will hopefully be all appointed. We then got to the end of August to develop the plan, with an aim that we would go back to the committee at the end of September to request the release of the funds. Once that happens, then we can move forwards with the appointment of the commissioners and really get going with the future exciting plans that the Commission will develop.
Well, thank you, Jason. Can I just say how pleased I am that you're going to be involved and you're going to be supporting it, because I think that's wonderful. So, how can you get involved? How can you take part? As I said, it won't work without your participation. It won't work without your help. It won't work without your support. It has to be the community leading this, and we need your help. So, as you leave, as I mentioned earlier, at the back of the hall there are some forms. You can fill them in here and leave them, or take them away, or download the form online. Please fill it in to indicate whether you would like to take part in the working group. And we need, because it's a tight time scale, we will need to have regular meetings, and you need to be prepared to commit to regular meetings and not just turn up at the meetings, but be doing work in between times. It's not going to be hugely onerous, but if we're to hit the deadline, and I know there are people who think we should have done this 50 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, we've got to do it in the next 3 or 4 months, or else we risk losing that money that the states have committed. It's got to be done. It's a tight scale. We've got to work with it, and we've got to have people who are prepared to help us to do that. The form will also ask you if you wish to contribute in any other ways, and it will also ask whether you wish to be kept updated on progress or to hear about future meetings. So please have a look at it. You don't have to tick every box if you don't want to. Even if you prefer to leave it anonymously, you can do that. But what is important is that we, as I say, get your interest and get your ideas. So that's probably about enough for me for the moment. And now I would like to invite questions. And can I just say, Joe here will have a roving microphone, but the roving microphone doesn't link to the speaker system in the hall. The people, it will only enable the people on Facebook, who are getting better service than you are this evening, I'm afraid. It will only enable the people on Facebook to know. So please ask your question when Joe's there. Raise your hand and Joe will come to you. But whoever's going to answer the question will just have to repeat the question to make sure that everybody in the hall has heard it. And I hope that by and large you can all hear me. No point asking you to put your hand up if you can't hear me, because anyway, but I hope you can all hear me. So who would like to fire away the first? We also may have some questions coming in online, and Jason's monitoring the, whatever it's called, the feed. I don't know what these things are called. He's monitoring it and he'll tell us what we have. But yeah, Gordon.
Thank you, sir. My name is Gordon Young, and I'm going to be 88 very soon. And I was telling the gentleman in front of me just now, or before the meeting, that my mother used to speak patois. My father was English. She used to speak to me in patois, and my father would say, "Speak English." And of course along came the Germans, and we were told at school we had to speak German. And it's funny enough, you know, I could understand the patois, but I never spoke it. I used to speak a little bit, but I was brought up hard, worked hard. From the day I was 13 I had to work, and I was always spoken to in Guernsey patois. And I think it's time that it was revived, because there's not many in Guernsey now that will speak it at all, and they don't seem to understand what French is anyway. And there's a difference between French and the Guernsey patois, and also the Jersey French patois. It's just totally different, and that should be brought about now and taught to the young children as soon as possible, even if it's got to be a lesson once a week in school. Thank you.
Well, for those who didn't hear it, that was Gordon Young, who told us that he looks so young, but apparently he's 88. And like many of us, he was brought up in a family where one member of the family, I think you said your father, spoke it, everybody else spoke English, and he grew up hearing the language, not speaking it, and he regrets. He can understand it, a bit like me. I can sort of understand it, but I can't speak it. And he's very much in favour of reviving the language, teaching it in school in whatever way. And education, you will remember that slide that said I think there was a question in there, Gordon, but if there was, I'm trying to answer it. The slide that said what the 4 broad objectives are for the Commission. The second one, and they're not in order of importance. The second one is facilitate the effective teaching of Genesee. They're not equal. Well, they all need to be worked at. Somebody else has asked in a message I had beforehand, will there be equal funding across all those areas? I don't see it being equal funding. Some of those will need more funds than others. But the purpose of the Language Working Party is to help us to get the ideas and then to help us build a plan so that we can say, yeah, the resources that we need to achieve each of those things are whatever they are. So yes, effective teaching, and that means getting it into the schools in one way or another. Exactly how, I don't know, with the money available. That's why we want to hear from you. We want people's ideas how we can do that. Deputy Dudley Owen, and you're still mic'd up. You probably don't need the roving mic. But do you want to come here so that people can hear your, I don't know if you're asking a question or answering.
No, well, I just thought that it would be useful, Gordon and others that are listening, to know that the Education, Sport and Culture Committee's mandate is very broad. Now, obviously, we have education on one side, and we've obviously got the going all the way through to the cultural aspect, which is where the Guernsey Language Commission has been set up on that side. But the links, obviously, to education are intrinsic, and we're very lucky that we're going to be able to feed into our Guernsey curriculum, which isn't the English national curriculum, it's our own unique curriculum designed in Guernsey by Guernsey teachers for Guernsey children and students. And that enables us to be able to feed in content, which is all of our, information that we want to within our lessons. And curriculum planning and the information and the content and the knowledge that is fed into that is something that is key and comes from our Education Central Office. So being able to join up the Guernsey Language Commission and the work that we do there that comes out of the Working Party and the Guernsey Language Commission in the future, the actual technical side of it and the words and the language, the vocabulary and how it's used, is key to be able to plug into schools. One thing that Deputy Neil Linder and I tried to do in the last term was to find out where it would be best to try and put signage, you know, Guernsey French and the patois signage. Where would we get most impact? Wouldn't it be great to have dual language signage in our schools? Wouldn't it be wonderful to have dual language signage in our shops, so that that is the place where you see it and it comes alive? The aim of the people like ourselves is not to get Guernsey French spoken every day as a replacement for English, which is our lingua franca, but we do have French now recognised as one of our official languages, as well as Genesiers, but it's to bring it back to life for those people who want to use it. And Gordon, you're absolutely right. That starts with our young people, especially when they're very small in schools, so that when they're like sponges, unlike us older people who don't absorb information so well, but the little sponges, and it's really key to reinvigorate that enthusiasm that I know a lot of people in this room have had going into our primary schools and volunteering and teaching our young people Guernsey French, Genesiers, in readiness for the Eisteddfod. But we want that to be a more normal thing, not just once a year at the Eisteddfod.
We'll just go to our online audience for just a moment with 2 questions, and then we'll come back for 2 questions in the room. Starting with Sarah, she asks, would you consider pursuing a collaboration with a language learning app like Duolingo? Sarah, that's a great idea. So I encourage you to fill in the form online. And the link to the online Google form is in the comments on the Facebook page, Guernsey Language Commission. So just go to Guernsey Language Commission Facebook page and you will see the link to the Google form there. You don't need to download anything, it's online, and just click it and your reply will be submitted. And then we have another question from Nick. You seem to be saying that you have 300k to develop a project specification and implement it. In my experience of project management, the project spec usually comes before funding is allocated. Would you like to respond?
Am I still?
Yep, you're still.
Right, I'll stand up here for the duration. Nick, thank you very much for your question. In the last term, the funding was approved. The previous Committee of Education, Sport and Culture, headed by then Deputy Matt Fallais, supported by Richard Graham, who's in the audience tonight, brought the Language Commission policy paper to the States, and it was successfully, I think, unanimously approved. And Deputy Latoc's in the audience, he's nodding. So we're all very much in support of that. And the money allocation is caveated on the basis that the Commission, in its embryonic form, as described tonight by Sir Richard Collis, that the business plan, or the language plan as it's being called, is being developed by the working group. Then that comes back to the Committee for Education, Sport and Culture to approve the release of the further funding, based upon the fact that we are confident that the group is going to be able to get the traction behind it that it needs in order to achieve the aims as set out in that original policy letter. So I hope that that provides some reassurance to Nick and also any other people who are wondering about the allocation of funding. But obviously what we will want to be able to do is to see that the Language Commission not only is capable and is delivering what we say, but also can be measured against the key performance indicators that we set out, that actually that is what success looks like, and that further funding can be released into the future. We hope that hasn't been allocated as yet, but also that the Commission is sufficiently independent to raise funds from other areas as well, so that, however that looks in the future, with match funding maybe from the private sector or just fundraising initiatives.
So I mean, the way I understand it, one could take the policy letter as being a very broad spec, but it is so broad that we wouldn't be able to deliver everything that's there. So that's why we need to prioritise and concentrate, and that's what the plan will do. Yeah. So Deputy Gollop has a question. Just wait for the microphone, Deputy Gollop.
Well, very good and fascinating speeches. Like Advocate Green here, I took part this year in the post-COVID Eisteddfod as a very much of a beginner, despite having done some of the courses Joe and Jan have done. And I won the cup, but before everyone thinks I was brilliant, I was the only candidate, and the adjudicator was being kind. But I too served on Culture and Leisure with Gloria, Mrs. Deputy Andrea's mother, and she was an indefatigable champion of Guernsey French against a degree of opposition. And so it's good to see the leadership this group's having and the progress being made. But one intriguing thing in Sir Richard's presentation was one of his aims or points was to build consensus. Perhaps in the past there was differences of approach between people from different parts of the island and different academic traditions. Apart from filling in the forms and serving on the working groups and so on, how will you build that consensus? What ideas will come forward? Gloria.
That's a very good question. For those who couldn't hear it, Deputy Gollop was picking up on the fact that I said the Language Working Party and the Language Commission, the initial directors, will have to build consensus. We'll have to build consensus because we need a plan. I mean, how we will do that, I hope that once we get the right people in the room, it will be people who are passionate about the language, people who want to do things, and actually they will want to make it happen. So it's not like, I don't see it as, yes, there will be some disagreements about things, but I'm sure that if everybody approaches it with the right ideas, which I'm sure they will do, then I don't see that it will be a huge problem to achieve consensus. And actually, I think there's probably more in common between all the people who want to promote the language, most of whom will probably say it's very late in the day, we should have done it long ago, but nevertheless, we've got some money now, let's do the best we can with the money we have. I think there will be a broad consensus, and how we'll do it, it'll depend on who's there and just how divergent the views are. Deputy Dudley, I may wish to add.
Yes, I would like to add, because I think that the personality of the leader of the group is actually integral to being able to bring people together. Having worked with Richard for my first term, whilst he wasn't able to make the state's debates all unanimous in their agreement over different policy areas, he was certainly able to manage a very contentious house at times and sometimes fractious house. So having seen the skills that Richard is able to employ, his diplomacy and his ability to be able to communicate really very clearly at different levels, I think that he is the right person very much and has the skills to be able to lead this group, not just in its infancy. I really do hope that he would stay on for some time to be able to chair the commission, but clearly that is a commitment and I wouldn't want to pin Richard down to that at the moment. But it is for me about personality, John, about those leadership qualities which I think that Richard Collis has in spades.
People like Sir Richard.
They do. He's a very likeable and agreeable character, isn't he? So. Joe.
Hi. As a bit of, I know this isn't working in here. It's a weird sensation. Oh, that's fine. So just a brief bit of background. I'm new to the island. My grandmother was born here. I've studied French and German at quite a high level, and I would not hesitate in saying that studying languages has transformed my life for the better in terms of my ability to meet people, to enjoy different cultures and to enrich my life and others. How much work is being done on the topic of consensus with education around the impact, the positive impact that learning patois can have on the learning of other languages and the positive impact that can have ultimately on people's lives? Because it really is, as I say, quite transformational. And then I had another question which was just about... Okay, all right, sorry.
Many people in the hall won't have heard that question, so Deputy Dudley Owen is going to answer it, and she needs first of all to repeat the question for the benefit of those who haven't heard. So,
the lady at the back of the hall is new to the island, and her grandmother was born in the island. And sorry, what's your name, please?
Hayley.
Hayley. Hello, Hayley. Hayley speaks various different languages and has been a scholar of languages and has found that almost transformative in her life in terms of skills and also relationships and travel, etc. And is asking how education is working to ensure that language, the promotion of speaking multiple languages and different languages is handled with students or just through the community, Hayley?
I think both. So the background to this point is there's been quite a lot, and there will be quite a lot of backlash against funding being put towards something that some parts of the population might perceive to be just part of history. And so my point is one of the big and key things to get people engaged is to make clear that actually, on the contrary, this is a really important skill for people to learn, adult or children, that can really help and lead into other aspects of life and create opportunity.
Yeah, no, I understand that the point that you're making is actually sort of playing some of the debate that we had a couple of years ago when we approved the setting up of the Language Commission, and acknowledging that there are parts of the community, as happens all around the world, where a language has demised to quite some extent, where you have different opinions, people saying, what's the point, it's dead, it's gone, no longer relevant to modern life, let's move on, we've got better things to spend our money on. And others, and I share this opinion in the other camp, of saying, no, this is part of our rich cultural heritage, we do need to go back, we need to claw this back into the modern day and make it relevant. We need to look at what the vocabulary looks like. Are we needing to modernise and update that vocabulary for the modern day? So in the way of making it relevant to our students today and giving them a thirst to learn their language and to find their cultural heritage, really will be one of the tasks of the Language Commission, working with schools and bringing it into the modern day setting. And I would hope that is, whilst that's difficult to achieve, it has been done in the Isle of Man, and I've been lucky enough to visit Isle of Man and visit their Language Commission and their place that they hold their meetings and bring students in, and they've had a massive success in reinvigorating their language. Dr. Mari Jones online, she's spoken to us about different ways of doing that, Julia Salabank as well. So there's lots of ways of doing this, and we do have modern and foreign language teachers obviously within our schools who also need to be invigorated and given Guernesiais as an option as well to be able to teach, because once we have our framework for teaching, then obviously plugging in the vocabulary into that is going to be key. I'm also a little bit of a linguist, certainly not, I'm sure, as to your degree, but I did my degree in Japanese language, I speak French, and so I know how transformative it can be and how it can open up a world for our young students. But to enable our young students to get back in touch with their heritage is absolutely key, and to start to have that swell of pride of being an islander.
How it will can enrich people's lives as a language that's present now, because if you learn Guernsey, it's a very short step to France, and it's a very short step to other languages. And if you've got that skill, they're applicable in different areas. I moved to the island 12 years ago, just have an interest in language and culture and music, but Guernsey has taken me to festivals in France. I've met all sorts of different musicians and people in France and all sorts of places, but the link is the language. And I'm not a speaker, but I'm an advocate for the language. So that's the key sort of modern link, I think. Yeah, that's very important.
Any other questions? Yep.
There will always be people who say spending money on culture is a waste of money. There will always be those people. But hopefully the majority of people realise just how rich our heritage and our culture are, and how important it is that we continue to preserve and promote it. As I said at the beginning, That's what makes us Guernsey. Yeah, if England are playing in the World Cup, I'll support England. I go to Twickenham to watch England play rugby. If the Ashes are on, I want them to defeat the Aussies. But I'm not English, and I don't want Guernsey to turn into England. And I get so irritated when I hear so many people say, we need to anglicise this, we need to copy what they're doing. We don't, we are Guernsey. We need to be proud of what we've got and what we do. We need to promote it.
You can get political now.
Sorry, I'm not political.
Are you sure? Richard, I speak very good English. Mon français n'est pas mal du tout. Mais that didn't cost anything to teach me English. It cost me a little bit to teach me French, because I was taught it at school. I learned a little bit of Guernsey French during the war, because I lived down at Varzon. And as soon as I went to Elizabeth College, they kicked the Guernsey French out of me to teach me French, which was a sad thing. Then I was fortunate enough to go to a boarding school in England, and again, my parents paid for me to learn all sorts of things. French was one of them. But conversational French, I didn't learn that at school, except I learnt it from an Australian. His father was the Australian representative of UNESCO in Paris. And my Australian friend was brought up in Paris, and he much preferred talking French. And he encouraged me to speak French every time we spoke together. And these were schoolboys talking French and swearing and chatting up the birds and doing all sorts of things. So what I would like to think is that those people in Guernsey who speak fluent Guernsey French should try very hard to almost insist that they speak to us enthusiasts not in English at all.
That was a very good point. For those of you who didn't hear it, John was saying that those people who are fluent in Genesier should basically speak it at every opportunity. And if they're speaking to somebody whose first language is English but who is interested in Genesier, they should speak that language to them. And I agree. And how the Language Commission can help to promote that and make that happen is one of the questions. That's a very good suggestion. If you've got suggestions as to how it can happen, feed it in, and the Language Commission will listen to that and see how they can use it. And you were making the point about conversational French. When I was in Caen, I was there with somebody else. I learnt conversational French really by going and staying with a French family in 2 successive years for a fortnight. So, and I did A-level, but I was in Caen with somebody who had only ever learnt French in the classroom. Their vocabulary, their knowledge of the dictionary, the French dictionary, was far greater than mine, but she could not make herself understood because she didn't understand how the French construct a sentence. She would translate an English sentence word by word. And that's, it's the true of any language. It's not just about, translating the words as you would see them. It is about conversation, and you only get that by conversing. So the more people who are able to engage in conversation, the better. And it's wonderful that there are groups who meet, and where, as Joe said earlier, there's the speed, I was going to say speed dating, maybe they do that as well. But there's the speed patois and the pure patois. It's great that happens, and let's encourage and promote more of it. Terry has a question.
I'd like to get back to teaching Guernsey French in schools. Being one of several people here who over many years have tried to teach Guernsey French to children in school, there are 2 things that are absolutely imperative if we try and do that. The first one is you need the support of the school, because quite frankly I have been at various schools and we haven't had the support from the teachers. I'm not running them down, they've got so many other things to do, but quite frankly, if you're going to teach Guernsey French to children during a lunch hour when they can come and go as they please, it does not work. And don't want to be negative, because I think this is a very good way of actually teaching them the language. But I think it has to be done as part of a curriculum, and it has to be done with the support of the teachers and of the schools, because without that, it just won't work, I'm sorry. But I'm sure we can do it that way. And I'm very positive. I feel that it is one way of getting the young people, whilst, as Andrea was saying, whilst they're sponges, get Guernsey French into their heads, and it won't go away completely.
So the comment has been, or the question is that how do we ensure that we can work together with schools and that the school it becomes as passionate about making sure that the children can learn the language as those who are delivering the lessons. And actually, I believe that it's through the formation of the Guernsey Language Commission and the formalising of a body, an organisation, where the job of the people within are to get up in the morning and to actually think about that, to be able to go and promote the language into the school, to be able to take the heavy lifting from the teachers who may not necessarily be speakers themselves. This is always the way in which I think that we should be working when we're trying to put more content into our schools, because whilst we have this wonderful big picture curriculum there which has a framework, we need to plug information into that, and that's that curriculum content. It's just in the same way that we do with our liberation. With my mum, we were speaking about the information about the deportees and Friends of Bibrak, and how do we get that information about the deportees story into schools, and this is working with our curriculum team to be able to provide that, because we shouldn't expect all of our teachers to be able to know everything. You know, we have subject specialists, and that's absolutely right and proper, but actually we do need to give them some of our unique content into which they can plug into a proper lesson plan, into a timetabled lesson, which I would like to think in the future we'd have that as part of our lesson timetable, not just as an add-on within a lunch hour or after school, when we know especially our smaller children are very tired or need their breaks, so that it can become seen as important as our other timetabled lessons. And I think that you're absolutely right. And obviously my children were at the Forest School. I know that you used to come into the Forest School and teach there as well, and so they've been beneficiaries, but we need to continue that as they get older. And you never know, we might be able to have a GCSE in Genesiers in time, or an A-level, and go on to different qualifications.
Could I just add one thing to what I said before? What I'm saying wasn't being negative.
I know. No.
Definitely wasn't being negative. And we have had teachers in one school in particular, and I'm not going to name that school, but it wasn't a country school, I'll say that, where the teachers have been very, very supportive and have given their all. And all we need is a bit of support. The people who teach it will need their support. But I'm not being negative.
No, and I know that you're not being negative in your question. I know that it's all about how do we overcome some of the things that we found as barriers in the past. How can we do things differently in order to make it work this time? And what we haven't had previously before is a Guernsey Language Commission that has been supported to the extent that this one has. There has been an iteration of a Guernsey Language Commission previously where a lot of people did a lot of hard work, gave up a lot of their time, and I don't think that it got the support that it needed to in the way that it should have done. But this one is different, and I hope that all the barriers that we've come across, and again, filling in the form at the back to say this was a barrier that we found in the past, you know, let's look at an idea. I think that if that's okay, Richard, is that not just good ideas about how to fix things, but what were problems in the past that we anticipate need to be fixed in the future as well.
Can I just say, I wouldn't like to prejudge what the working party will recommend, but I'll be hugely disappointed if they don't say we need to be supporting the people who go into schools, supporting the teachers. We need to be providing them with teaching materials that they can take in, stuff that they can use. We need to be teaching the teachers. You know, it's fantastic, Terry, that you go in, and I hope you'll still be with us in 30 years' time, but I suspect you may not be. But we need to teach the teachers, we need to provide them with materials, but there's other ways of getting the language in. I'm maybe overstepping the mark a bit, but there would be other ways of getting language into the schools. It doesn't have to be just as part of a Guernsey lesson. Just think of music. There's some fantastic Genesier music. Well, the music teachers are going in. They could be teaching that as part of what they do. And somebody said to me the other day, wouldn't it be lovely to have a nativity play in Genesier and take that into the sort of the junior schools? There's all sorts of ways one could get it in that it would just fit in the curriculum. And that, as you said earlier, that the children would start to hear it, they'll remember it. Imagine if they go home singing a catchy tune in Genesier. Their parents will want to catch on and they'll say what it is and they'll become interested. And it just needs, it becomes like a little flame that sort of spreads and then, catches a light or whatever it does.
I think what really rings in my mind, though, having kids of a certain age, i.e. teenagers, it needs to be made relevant to our modern life. That's right, and fun to learn. So it's not just about, we had La Bébé all the time when I was little, and I think that we do need to be trying to bring that up to date to something relevant, something that catches their imagination. And that's where I'd like to see retailers starting to put signage in their shops, because that's where people will pick it up and see it and then be able to refer to items, produce in the home in a Guernsey French way, so that they were actually starting to speak to parents, etc., with using the language.
I think there might be a question at the end of this, but I just wanted to make a comment. Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
It's better over there.
Better if you're over there.
Oh, see. I just want to make a comment to those who were discussing or making comments regarding this is just a cultural thing and it's not that important. It is very important. I spend a huge part of my life defending, representing Guernsey and often saying nous sommes ni anglais ni français. And one of the ways we can demonstrate that is by our investment in our local culture and language. And here is an example of it. I think it's really, really important. So, you see un homme excité ogné. And I think we've got to really see that. It is not just about keeping a dying language going. It's about who we are, and just touching on some of the things that Sir Richard said before. The tendency otherwise that we will, all become very bland and the same and sort of British or even just international Anglo-Saxons. And I think there's a huge role for us to play here. Others have done it and they've done it successfully. And so that's why I'm really pleased to see this come about. 20 years ago, as some of you know, we tried when I was first elected in the States to get going. And I think this is the fruit of that. And so I really hope that we can put our efforts behind it. The sort of comment and question I was going to make is that, interestingly enough, in the last 2 or 3 years, Normandy, which has never really put much effort into its own over 40 different dialects and versions of Norman French, including Girard and Genesier, and I think Sertier is included in that as well. I'm not sure about Origny, but anyway, but we're included in that, and they've put a lot of effort into it. And in a few weeks' time, there's La Quatrième Assobiard de Parler Normand in Caen. Now, I've represented Guernsey there for the last 3 occasions. Can somebody from the Commission go this time? Because I can't go. But I think it'll be really good because they have resources. And I was really surprised to find that, I'm sure others would know this, but I wasn't aware of it, that nearly 70% of the language and the grammar and the structures and the wording is the same amongst all of these different varieties. So we can use those resources, and I would really like us to link in that, because that would be a big help for the future.
Jonathan, what was the date?
I think it's the 14th, though. It's
very
soon. May.
Okay, that's interesting. Can I just add to that? When I was bailiff, I went with Jonathan sometimes. We were invited to Normandy. And some of you may know that probably about 4 or 5 years ago, the French reorganised their departments a little bit. And Basse Normandy and Haute Normandy were united in Normandy. And they now have a président of Normandy who's very proud of the fact he sees himself as the successor of the Duke of Normandy, and he is keen to promote Normandy throughout the world. He says it's the second best known region in the world, the best being California, the second being Normandy, partly because of the Norman Empire and the Norman Conquest, and partly because of the Normandy beaches. And he organises conferences involving people, and what was it? Sicily was part of Normandy as well. You know, the Norman Empire extended all over the place, and he is so keen to promote that. And I'm very keen, like you, Jonathan, to make contact with Normandy, with the University of Caen, where I already have some contacts, and work with them. And I know Professor Murray-Jones, I know, has attended conferences in Caen on the language. And there's a real opportunity for us there. And as you say, we can tap into their resources, and that will be wonderful. Yeah. Sorry, others have questions and time's ticking on. I think when everybody asks a question, can they please start with their name so that those listening have some idea who it is?
Oh, okay. My name is Chris Dye. And j'aimerais mot Dye parce que nous savons pas que nous savons qu'un commission ne sera pas les gens qui travaillent pour sauver la langue chez les gens ici. Hein, je vais tous les gens ici qui travaillent depuis des années des années pour sauver la langue. Et j'aimerais dire merci. Et je veux que tous les gens ici au Guernsey qui sont intéressés dans la langue comprennent que nous sommes tous sous la même jean. Hein, parce que je joue de temps en autre que y a des gens qui critiquent un jour ou un autre jour parce qu'ils ne visent pas, ils font servir un mot qui n'est pas le bon mot guernesien, ou il y a des gens qui sont souvent dans les écoles pour apprendre les enfants. Mais je crois que si nous supportons les gens, si nous ne disons pas des mots contre les gens, mais si nous supportons tous les volontaires, tous les gens qui éprouvent pour sauver la langue et pour apprendre les gens communs. Si nous disons merci aux gens qui travaillent, je veux des gens qui publient des livres, je veux des gens qui font des leçons, je veux des gens qui font des translations. Tout ça, c'est tout énormément important. Si nous ne supportons pas les gens qui font le travail, il y a des gens qui organisent les Stedford, il y a des gens qui organisent les speed patois, il y a des gens qui font toutes sortes de choses. Et si vous voyez des gens qui font du travail, s'il vous plaît, dites merci. Parce que moi, je ne le fais pas ça. J'aimerais prendre chute minute pour dire merci à tous les gens qui travaillent pour garder la langue visée encore. Et je veux que tout le monde, toute la paix qui chante, la poignée de gens au star, mais qui va chez. No, how do you say get bigger? How will grow? How do you say grow? Créer. Thank you. Mais je crois que les gens, je crois que le nombre de gens va créer. Et quand, si nous voulons que la langue crée, j'aimerais que nous that we support each other. That we. Yeah, well done. Thank you. That's the best I can do. Thank you.
A really interesting job there. I think we're going to go back to Hayley and raise your hand if you've got a question. So Jeff, okay, so we'll go Hayley then. Jeff, Jason, do we have anyone online who's wanting to ask a question? No? Okay, Hayley, off you go.
It was a quick follow-on the school piece. Because this is a really quick process of recruiting the working group, and the vast majority of people in this room are not at school, has anybody approached all the schools, particularly the high schools, but I would potentially stretch that out further to find willing volunteers to be part of the working group, because they are so critical to the success of this and to getting the word spoken, and to your point, creating new vocabulary, making it relevant, all of those things. But there's no point in us sitting here telling young people what they should be doing, because that's not the best way of doing it.
Hayley, I think that you've raised a very good point there, and Hayley's point was around whether any moves at this stage, prior to the launch of the Commission tonight, had been made to recruit any members of the working party from our staff in the secondary schools, or indeed even amongst the high schools, the private colleges. Oh, you're looking for pupils? No, that hasn't been put forward, but that's again another idea to be able to put that forward, to see whether there are any students who might be interested, and or what the capacity of that could be, of how they could work with the Guernsey Language Commission. But possibly at this stage, for the working group, is around the plan and feeding that into the Youth Commission, which has a ready-made youth forum. I think might be the way of best getting the voice of youth. No. Well, I don't. There's yet. As I said, I think that's an idea, again, another one of those ideas to take on board, definitely. So, no, I think that's good. And also, just going back to Chris, thank you very much. I picked up some of what she was saying. My Guernsey French is not sufficiently honed to have been able to understand all of it. But from what the positive commentary that I got from you was around, if we can get this to work, and the volunteers, and get the people and get behind it, and the support, that we could grow this big quite well. So I think that's about what the measure of what you were saying, but I'm embarrassed to say that my Guernesiais is not as good as it could be. Oh,
oops, sorry. Oops.
Oh. It was.
Sorry, that was bound to happen somewhere. Can I just thank Chris? I know you do an awful lot to promote the language in various ways, and it's fantastic, and we agree with what you say. Just to come back on what Hayley's saying, we haven't reached out to anybody at this point because we wanted to go out to everybody together. We didn't want to be favouring some people and run the risk that others would say, well, why have you gone there but you haven't gone here? But it's a great idea that you've had. Let's reach out to the schools, and we can do that. And we're going to be, I hope, fairly active on social media. That's how you engage with young people. You won't see me on it, but you'll see young people on it. So there will be opportunities. So thank you for the idea. Jeff has a question here in the front. And we may only, I think we should aim to finish about 8:30. So there may be one or two more questions, and we'll aim to finish about 8:30.
Yes. Just three simple specifics. People like me who travel by bus often will know that as you're approaching the town terminus, the recorded voice says, "You're approaching the town terminus. Thank you for travelling with CT Plus à la prochaine." That's a good start. And this à la prochaine is something which has actually spread quite a lot by dint of repetition. Still sticking with buses, when I was small, back in the Middle Ages, I used to see the signs for Guinness on the buses. I'm sure some of you remember that. And it said, "As-tu bu ton Guinness oignon?" Or, "Le Guinness est bon pour thé." I didn't understand it at that age, but I asked my parents, and I repeated it exactly as I'd read it, and they translated it for me. That's the sort of culture we need. And I don't think it would spend a lot of money by plastering buses with all sorts of phrases in Guernesiais, which visitors would start to wonder what they mean, locals, and above all the hundreds of school children that are travelling daily. They would ask what they mean. And I think that there's a lot to be done
at not very large expense. Second point I'd like to make, and these are very simple points, some people who should know better say that Guernsey has no grammar. Well, I've got a book here which is by Eric Fellows Lucas, which some of you may be familiar with. He published it in 1985. It is a brilliant textbook showing the structure of the language in the same way as you might find the structure of any language as taught in schools. I know there are other books on the structure of the language by Marie de Gary, by Dr. Tomlinson, and these things I think should be available in all school libraries in a specific Guernsey block. And the last thing I would say is there are those who say that there's no literature in Guernsey. Well, there is literature. And the patriarch of our literary geniuses was Métivier. He started it. Courbet followed him. And Courbet wrote Les Chants du Drain Rimeux, the songs of the last rhymester. I feel emotional when I say that he thought he was the last rhymester. What did these people do? They spawned other writers which followed them in the generations, and they continued to excite the local population. Very symbolic is the fact that at Métivier's obituary it was said that he will be remembered for generations to come. Does anyone know the vault in which he is buried in St. Martin's Cemetery? His vault is totally blank, totally weathered. I find that terribly symbolic about the Guernsey language. Terribly symbolic. I think that these people should be celebrated, and I think their books should, if necessary, be reprinted, and again, they should be in every school library. Some of work has been done to translate some of these things. Denis Courbet's Chant du Drain Rimeux contains a section called Attoire de Guernsey, which is a description of the whole, going around the whole island, and as it was in his time. And that was translated word for word into English by Ken Hill. That work, I believe it's now in the Prio Library, but that work should be translated, should be published, and it should be again in all school libraries. So that's, for what it's worth, my input. Thank you.
I think almost perhaps that's a good note on which we can close, because what we just had there is an illustration of some lovely ideas, of some things that can be done without too much difficulty. Think of what the post office have done on their vans. And Jeff's right, it wouldn't be difficult to do something very similar on the buses. It wouldn't really cost money. And I would hope, and I don't want to prejudge what the language plan will be, what the working party will say, but I would hope they take those sorts of ideas on board and they say, yes, let's work with CT+. Let's try and do stuff on the buses. The idea, I can't remember who it was earlier, said, let's have in the shops, in the butchers or the fishmongers or the greengrocers, let's have labelling that has the Guernsey word, the Guernsey language word for whatever it might be. Let's have those so that people go in and they order by that. The Language Commission would be able to facilitate all that. It won't be able to do it all at once. It must prioritise these things, but it wouldn't cost a lot. And you're right, there is a huge body of literature. There's a huge body of recordings, video, audio. They're sort of spread all over the place. And I know there's some good stuff on the Language Commission website that needs to be improved. But wouldn't it be lovely if we somehow brought all that together so that anybody wanting to look at anything in the language could go to one place and find it, or at least find the reference to it. I would hope those are all things that the Language Commission do. But you'll have better ideas. You'll have other ideas. Thank you for coming this evening. I hope we've stimulated some thoughts. I hope we've inspired you to want to contribute and to want to offer your help. As I said, there's a form at the back. Either fill it in now and leave it here, or take it away with you, fill it in online, whatever. We need your help. It's got to be a community project. We need people to help us to promote the language, to do what the Language Commission needs to do. It's not too late. It would have been lovely to do it 50 years ago. It's not too late. We need to do it now, and we need to do it with your help and the help of those online. Thank you for coming. Please support us. Thank you.